Hello you lovely lot, my name is Max, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I need another Nottingham Forest match preview where today we are discussing Nottingham Forest's upcoming away fixture against Leicester City on Monday night against a team currently sat bottom of the Premier League table and licking their wounds after some pretty poor results in recent weeks. If you're new to this series, the format goes as following. We start with an initial discussion, give some context to our opposition and their season thus far. We then discuss the stats and the key players for the opposition before briefly touching on the tactical side of their game, followed by my predictions for the scoreline on the day. So if you do enjoy this kind of stuff, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell and check out the series playlist so far. With that being said, let's start talking about Leicester City. Also, one last thing before we get into it, I've started a TikTok account. I'm going to be posting regular football content up on there. I'll leave a link to it in the description. Drop me a follow and be sure to check out the videos I've got on there at the moment. With that being said, let's get into this video. So as usual, we give a bit of an introduction, starting with some context for our opposition. It was pretty good last time out for Leicester City, finishing 8th in the Premier League, although they did fail to qualify for any European competition for the first time in 3 seasons. And it did really feel like a step back based on the previous couple of seasons under Rodgers. They were of course knocked out the FA Cup 4-1 against Forest in the 4th round, despite the fact they won it the season before. They finished 8th in the Premier League, as I mentioned, failing to qualify for European football. And on the basis of European football, they actually failed to make it out of their Europa League group, eventually making it to the semi-finals of the Conference League, a competition that deep into it they look like the favourites to win. Despite this, they have actually been really consistent since their return to the Premier League. Since they won the title in 2016, they've only failed to finish in the top half of the Premier League once, which was the season after they won it, and in general have been a pretty consistent top half team since their return to the Premier League, particularly under Brendan Rodgers, where they've been consistently a very good and attractive team to watch. They play good football, but this season it's just not quite been the same. Especially when you see the start to the season, they've had a really poor transfer window where they only actually made one permanent signing, Wout Fages, arriving from French side Rennes, and of course Kasper Schmeichel, their captain, departing the club for Nice and not bringing in any kind of replacement for him in goal and relying on a keeper in Danny Ward, who has very limited Premier League experience or even top level football experience in his career, and as we'll get into in a bit, not gone too well for them. And as I mentioned in the intro, they're currently sat 20th in the Premier League heading into this game against Forest, and you do feel like Brendan Rodgers' job is hanging by a thread. So with all that being considered, let's talk a bit about the stats and dive into detail as to why Leicester are struggling so much this season. In terms of the attacking stats, Leicester starts the season has actually been quite interesting. On one hand, they've actually scored the 11th most goals in the Premier League at the time of recording, which is pretty decent for a team sitting in 20th position. But when we dive into the stats in a little bit more detail, it doesn't make for too good reading. They actually only generate around 11 chances per 90 minutes, 11 shots per 90, which is the 5th worst record in the Premier League. And expected goals would suggest they've actually generated the 4th worst quality of chances over the course of the season, and of course have that very lucky streak of finishing that they've had pretty consistently in their run in the Premier League. And generally, they're a pretty poor attacking side who do generally get the rub of the green on that side. That being said, when we flip things the other way around and look at their defensive record, it's very much clear-cut as to where the issues in this side lie. They've conceded the most goals in the Premier League at the time of recording, including 6 in their most recent match, a 6-2 loss to Tottenham Hotspur. And this is despite the fact that they actually only conceded the 11th most shots in the Premier League per 90 minutes, and they are 5th from bottom on expected goals conceded. And of course, a big reason as to why they've conceded so many goals is their goalkeeper, and we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail. So Danny Ward's been much maligned by rival fans as to his poor performances this season, and it's little wonder why. Kasper Schmeichel, despite being on the decline over the last couple of seasons, has regularly put up above average shot stopping stats over the course of his Premier League career, even in his sort of lowest seasons towards the end of his Premier League career, which is around 70% save percentage. That's around average for a Premier League goalkeeper. If we look at Danny Ward, he's actually only saving around 40% of the chances that face him. He's the only keeper in the Premier League with a lower than 50% save percentage. This means if you take a shot against him, you are more likely to score than you are not to score, if that makes any kind of sense. He's a poor quality goalkeeper for the Premier League, and there's no disrespect to the lad. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he's definitely not a Premier League quality goalkeeper. Of course, the issues that Leicester are facing defensively aren't just down to the goalkeeper. In general, defensively, they've been pretty poor over the last 18 months or so, and they are the worst kind of combination of a defensive team. They concede a lot of shots and a lot of high quality opportunities. If we look at a team like Spurs or West Ham, for example, they're teams that concede quite low quality opportunities despite the fact they concede quite a lot of shots. On the other hand, you've got teams like Manchester City and Liverpool who don't concede a lot of shots and don't concede particularly high quality shots. Generally, a team on the other end of the spectrum are Leicester City. They are a team who concede lots of opportunities and lots of high quality opportunities in the context of the Premier League. To give you a bit of numerical analysis for this, in terms of the proximity of shots to goal, the shots they face are the 4th closest to goal in the Premier League at the time of recording, and their 3rd for shot on target percentage against, which means they concede the 3rd highest volume of shots on target in the Premier League when compared against the shots that they concede. So they're not just got a poor goalkeeper in Danny Ward. As a team in general, they're not doing enough to mitigate opportunities and prevent him being tested that often. Overall, Leicester are actually quite a good attacking team, consistently a good attacking team over the course of the last few years, but some key departures in their goalkeeping area and in their defence have left them a really porous defensive side that concede lots of opportunities and lots of high quality opportunities that leave them as one of the worst defensive teams in the Premier League. Some key additions would be required in January. In the summer, I definitely think they need a new goalkeeper. I think that's pretty obvious. They probably need another centre-back or two and potentially even another defensive midfielder to take some of the bear and workload off of Wilfred Ndidi, who's still being worked pretty much into the ground and still having to fill in defence when he needs to. So that being said, let's start talking about the tactics in a little bit more detail and give a bit more analysis into the actual shape we can expect from Leicester on the day. So historically, Brendan Rodgers as a coach has been pretty flexible in the shapes he's played. He can play 3 at the back, he can play 4 at the back, and this has translated historically pretty well at Leicester. They're a team who've played 4 at the back. They can also play 5 at the back if it's necessary, and of course depending on personnel available and the team that they're facing. Generally though, he has preferred to play a variation on a 4-1-4-1. It can look like a 4-3-3 with more advanced wingers. It can look like more of a 4-5-1, pressing the defensive midfielder into the midfield to bulk out central areas, or it can look like a 4-1-4-1 staggered with a defensive midfielder offering a screening presence and allowing the midfield to be congested by the fullbacks. In terms of specific personnel, of course, Wilfred Ndidi is the man usually sitting in that anchoring position. Of course, historically has been one of the best defensive midfielders in Europe over the past few seasons. Dropped off a little bit in the last 18 months, but what you do get from him pretty consistently is really high tackle interception defensive duel numbers and decent progressive actions, but not a lot that you would maybe expect from a all-round defensive midfielder like a Rodri or someone like that. He does enough progressively to aid the team, but he's mainly in there to win the ball back and sort of shuttle it onto players like Tielemans and Maddison. Speaking of which, Maddison and Tielemans can occupy more central areas. Tielemans can drop into deeper positions. He's a really good deep line playmaker who can pick up the ball from deep positions, spread out into wide areas. He can play it into the striker if they're playing a high line, the team who they're facing, and generally just keep stitching things together, progress play, and get the ball into the final third. The wingers can then hold the width in this team. They can also come more into narrow areas, but generally are quite wide wingers who look to stretch the team, allowing the fullback to come inside and congest central areas. And you've of course got James Maddison, probably the best player in this team right now, certainly on form. Really good start to the season from him, which is surprising because you can't really say that for many Leicester players at the moment. He can come into these central left-hand pocket spaces, picking the ball up between the lines, able to feed the ball into the channel to look for runs from wide players, and of course is a really big threat from wide positions and from deep positions from long shots. He's really good from distance at getting shots off and has had a really good start to the season in terms of productivity for this Leicester team, and he's probably going to be the biggest threat in this team. He's not necessarily going to run in behind us and cause us too many problems with pace, but picking the ball up in those pockets, it's going to be really important we have a player on him, sort of occupying him and not allowing him to get time on the ball. Of course, overloading the midfield like they do, it allows them sort of build the ball through the zones from the defenders into the midfielders, into more advanced midfield positions, and then eventually into the final third. Rodgers historically has preferred to play quite a possession-based system where they can rotate the ball, sort of look for the right pass, then maybe they get the run, and then the ball through from someone like a Maddison and a Tielemans, sort of looking to pick that final pass out. One thing that Leicester have historically had issues with, and especially when James Maddison isn't fit, is their ability to find that killer pass. He's really the only player in that team, barring maybe Tielemans, who can find those sort of killer final third passes to create chances, and they can be suspect sort of just passing the ball around. It's a problem that Arsenal have had before Martin Odegaard signed for the club, lacking a real conventional number 10 who can pick the ball up and find those passes. And the real disadvantage of doing this, especially against a team like Forest who are really good at high turnovers, is you end up sort of being a bit lackluster, maybe some loose passes, you can then surrender possession, and because you've committed so many men forward into these kinds of areas of the pitch, you can then find yourself sort of getting turned over and chances being created against you. And something I lastly want to touch on about Leicester specifically that is worrying me is the drop in intensity for them as a side. If we look at something like passes per defensive action, which is a really good metric for determining the intensity of teams when they're trying to regain possession, Leicester historically have ranked around the sort of 10, 11, 12 passes per defensive action metric, which has consistently put them definitely top half, sometimes even top 6 under Brendan Rodgers in the Premier League. This season it's dropped to close to 16, putting them in the sort of bottom third of teams in the Premier League. And it's really noticeable when you see them play. They tend to play a lot deeper. They tend to be a lot more negative on the ball. They're not as proactive at getting into these sort of aggressive final third areas. They're sat back in quite a deep shape, looking to counter-attack, soak up pressure. And of course, as a team who are geared towards being more intense at regaining possession, it's quite a drastic shift into being more passive and looking to maybe congest central areas to win the ball back. And I don't know what this issue is. I don't know why they've done this, whether it's a change in system, whether it's a lack of fitness, whether the players have just down tools and don't really want to play in this way anymore. But it's maybe a combination of a few of these things. But generally you find that Leicester are a very passive team now compared to what was quite an exciting team 3 or 4 years ago when Brendan Rodgers first came in. Either way, this probably will see Forest have large swathes of the game where they're actually going to have some uncontested possession in the midfield. And that to me suggests that it might be a good opportunity to get Remo Freuler into the team in terms of natural or all-out central midfielders in the Forest team. I think he's probably the best on the ball. I think he offers the most in terms of possessional stylistically. I think he offers the most. And so I think it might be a good opportunity to play him, whether that's maybe on the right-hand side of a 4-4-2 diamond like we've got set up here, maybe the left-hand side of a 4-3-3 where we try and get some width with Brennan Johnson and Owini and of course Dennis, who can play in wider areas. And it's just an opportunity maybe for the Swiss to get in there and get some touches on the ball and cause some problems, because in terms of central midfielders, barring guys like Morgan Gibbs-White who are more attacking midfielders, he feels like the player who could create from deeper positions where we might have some uncontested possession. And just touching on the shape, I do think we should maybe look to move to a 4 at the back. I think it's been necessitated by some injuries to some of our defenders. I think McKenna is going to be a doubt. Near Kaito, of course, still not fit. It could look like something like Bardet and Worrell. It could maybe see McKenna come in there, but I do think a move to a back 4 could be stylistically a good decision against Leicester City, who are a team who are in a bit of a lack of form at the moment, and it could be an opportunity to knock a few goals past them and recover our goal difference. In terms of shape in the midfield, we could, like I say, go for more of a 4-4-2 diamond, having a number 10 with 3 central midfielders. We could go for a 4-3-3 where we've got a little bit more impotence in the final third. Of course, it just depends really on how Leicester are going to shape up, and we can change the shape during the match, but I'd like to see us go for a more proactive attacking formation in this game. And my final point on Leicester is that they are a team who are very poor at defending set pieces. They've conceded the most set piece goals in the Premier League so far this season. Spurs showed that Danny Ward is not a keeper who is confident coming off his line and commanding the box. And historically under Steve Cooper, Forest have been a very good team from set pieces. So I definitely think this could be a really good avenue for us to generate chances and to create opportunities from. So in terms of the scoreline for this match, I'm going to go for a 3-1 win for Nottingham Forest. I might be being a bit ambitious, especially considering Forest are in quite poor form at the moment, but Leicester are just as equally in poor form in the Premier League. I do feel like Brendan Rodgers' job is hanging by a thread, and I think this is a really good opportunity to bed in some more of the new signings, get Remo Freuler some minutes in the midfield, and potentially see what could be long-term the vision of what this Forest team could look like. I think there's a really good opportunity to get Lingard back involved, Gibbs-White especially. I just think as a team, it's a good opportunity against what is on paper a good team, but are in such poor form, you could see us picking up a good result against. Of course though, let me know your score predictions in the comment section. And of course, whilst you're down there, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video, including the match previews and some different kinds of content that I've got planned for the next few weeks. And of course, check out my TikTok. I've got some really interesting videos already out there, and I've got some really cool Forest specific content planned to go out there in the next few weeks. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, Reds. Enjoy the game if you go in. I will catch you later.